Some stories come from newspapers, some come from police reports, and some are passed from one person to another for decades. Tonight's story falls into the third category. It was shared with me by someone who claimed the encounter happened to a relative back in the 1970s. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But in the hills between Clarendon and Manchester, there are still people who refuse to travel certain roads after midnight, not because of thieves, not because of wild animals, but because something they say has no face. A figure that appears along lonely stretches of road surrounded by limestone hills and thick bushes. A figure that never chases, never runs, never speaks, and if you see it, the elders say that the real horror doesn't happen on the road. It happens when you get home and look into the mirror. This is the story of Paul B., a cane farmer who encountered what locals called the Faceless Man. And if this story finds you alone tonight, you may want to avoid mirrors after dark. December 1974. Paul was 34 years old, a cane farmer, a husband, and a father of 3. His truck broke down late one evening on a lonely stretch of road between Clarendon and Manchester. The nearest house was miles away. No phone, no passing traffic, no choice but to walk. Paul wasn't worried. He knew these roads. He had walked them since he was a boy. "Duppy no trouble me, you know," he often told people. He lit a cigarette and started walking. The road twisted between limestone outcrops and thick bushes. Moonlight spilled across the gravel, but something felt wrong. The night was too quiet. No crickets, no frogs, no barking dogs from distant yards. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. Paul saw a figure standing ahead. At first, he thought it was another traveler, but something about it wasn't right. The figure wasn't moving, and it seemed taller than any man he had ever seen. Paul slowed his pace. The closer he got, the more uncomfortable he felt. Every hair on his body stood up. "Me know say me fi turn back," he would later tell his family, "but me couldn't move, me just lock in." Then he realized why the figure looked so strange. Its feet weren't touching the ground. The legs simply ended above the gravel. The figure hovered silently, swaying slightly, like cloth hanging in still air. Paul stopped. The cigarette slipped from his fingers. Then the figure began moving toward him, not walking, not running, gliding, slowly, smoothly, without making a single sound. As it drew closer, moonlight touched his face. Paul felt his stomach drop. There was no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, pale surface where the human face should be. Like someone had erased every feature. The figure stopped only a few feet away. Paul couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe properly. The thing tilted its head, slowly, curiously, as if examining him. Then Paul heard something. Not a voice, not words, just a low vibration. Deep humming sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. The sound grew louder and louder and louder until it felt like it was inside his skull. Then suddenly, the figure turned, glided off the road, and disappeared in the darkness between the limestone and rocks. Gone, just like that. Paul ran. He ran harder than he had ever run before in his life. He barely remembered reaching home. His wife later said he arrived pale, shaken, and covered in sweat. He refused to explain what had happened, not that night, not the next morning, not until 3 days later. And even then he only told part of the story, because something happened after he got home. Something he was too frightened to talk about. The morning after the encounter, Paul went to shave. He stood in front of the small mirror above the wash basin, and he looked up and froze. The room appeared normally in the reflection. The wall behind him, the towel hanging nearby, the doorway, everything except his own face. Where his face should have been, there was nothing. A smooth blank space, exactly like the thing he had seen on the road. Paul couldn't move. Seconds passed, then slowly his eyes appeared, then his nose, then his mouth, as if his reflection was rebuilding itself piece by piece. Paul dropped the razor into the sink. His wife rushed in and found him on his knees, terrified, crying, unable to explain what had happened. Paul's mother eventually brought him to an elderly spiritual woman known throughout the hills. After listening quietly,
There are things in old limestone country that don't belong in this world.
she told him some spirits wander without identity, without names, without faces, and sometimes when they find someone alone, they try to borrow what they no longer have. She prepared a cleansing bath using salt and bitter herbs, then gave Paul a small pocket mirror.
Carry this with you every day,
She told him.
so your reflection will always know where it belongs.
Paul carried that mirror for years, and he never walked that road at night again. Some listeners may believe this story, others may dismiss it as folklore, but stories about faceless spirits have been told across Jamaica for generations. And according to this person who shared this encounter with me, Paul never completely recovered from what happened that night. Even decades later, he checks every mirror twice, just to make sure his reflection was still there. And maybe that's what makes this story so frightening. Not the faceless figure on the road, not the silent hills, not even the darkness. It's the idea that one night you might look into the mirror and see a stranger looking back, or even worse, see nothing at all. If you have ever heard a story about the Faceless Man, or another Duppy encounter from rural Jamaica, let me know in the comments. And if you're new here, remember to like, subscribe, and join us for more Jamaican horror, folklore, and true encounters. This has been Scared in Jamaica. Walk good. And before you go to sleep tonight, take one last look into the mirror.